Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Randall Redfield, the Executive Director at the Polyvagal Institute.
So welcome Randall Redfield, who is the Executive Director of the Polyvagal Institute. But I wanted to let our listeners know a little bit more about your background because you have quite a significant history before your involvement in the Polyvagal Institute with your journey with integrated listening systems. So please share that story with us.
Okay. Hi, Joanne.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see you. Nice to hear your voice. Where to begin? I'll try and do it succinctly. I don't have a background in healthcare, so I come from the outside, so to speak. I was initially introduced to the world that led me to work with the Minsons and develop ILS through a sound therapy that came to the United States from England called Door Achievement Centers. And they were coming to the States to implement a program they had developed, which was really using balance and visual tracking activities as a way of helping kids with dyslexia and learning difficulties, ADHD. They weren't really addressing developmental issues, but it was a therapy that worked. And I was fascinated by it because I had a background in movement. I used to play tennis on the professional circuit, and I thought I knew a lot about movement, but I'd never imagined that it could help people read better, right? So this was back around 2000. And to say that you were going to improve someone's learning abilities through movement was really kind of a far out thing to say. So it completely fascinated me, and it actually worked. So it really drew me in. The company didn't make it. They had a model that required implementation of the program at home. And so there was this huge attrition rate. Anyway, company didn't make it. I was fascinated by the therapy and when looking for ways to continue doing it and to make it stronger. And in that process, I ran across Kate O'Brien Minson and her husband, Ron Minson. And they, at the time, of course, were practitioners of the Tomatis method through their own company, DLS, here in Denver. And Dr. Ron was teaching other therapists how to implement sound therapy. And so they hired me as a consultant to help them build their business. And in that process became my mentors in sound therapy. And we worked together for probably a couple years. And then around 2006, we decided to start a new company, which would be bringing together sound and movement. And we launched ILS in 2007. And it was an experiment. And you were one of the first pioneers, I guess you'd say, right, to start using it.
So privileged to become an instructor. It was such an amazing journey and such an honor to be part of that and teach this, information to practitioners throughout the US and Canada. It was just, So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You were already, you already knew at that time more about movement than I do now. And you were probably combining it with different types of listening therapies. So you were way ahead of your time. We were the first ones to do it sort of in a systematic kind of way, right, as a company. And I can't remember when you came on to be a trainer for us, but that was probably, 2010 or 12 or something like that, maybe.
I think 2010.
Yeah. So anyway, at that point, then we were training mostly SIOTs and sensory integration OTs, and a lot of them, yourself included, sort of became my mentors in how the therapy was applied clinically, right? Because I didn't know anything about clinical settings or working with clients like that. And so that whole journey went on, and the company grew, and by 2015, I guess we trained about 10,000 therapists in, I think, 30 or 40 different countries. Both Dr. Ron and Kate were wonderful trainers. And I think that was one of the main reasons why people were adopting the program so rapidly. And beyond that, we had come upon something that we weren't really sure, how it would pan out when we first started. But somehow the combination of music and sound, sound and movement is significantly more effective than either of those two therapies on their own. There's some kind of exponential effect that happens when the brain that gets that kind of a full sensory training, where you're doing those activities that when you're receiving that input on a regular basis at the same time. It's got just an amazing sort of effect on the brain that's pretty global, right?
You're right. And I just want for our listeners to sort of know what we're actually talking about is the ILS focus system that has 7 different programs loaded on that, and is using predominantly, it's all based on Tomatis background, but it's classical music that has been filtered and modulated to help us achieve the different therapeutic outcomes, and we combine that with movement.
Yeah, and well, with the focus system with ILS, we kind of flipped Tomatis upside down. Tomatis was really a high frequency focus, and really with ILS, we're getting feedback by 2006-07 that a lot of the therapists were seeing better results with the lower and mid-range frequencies. So one of the big changes with the focus system was not just adding the movement piece, but it was really changing the protocols so that we had lower and mid-range frequencies as the focus, and that ended up working really nicely. But by 2016, we'd started doing podcasts, right? And they had just come out at the time, and we were putting together a list of people to interview, and Stephen Porges was toward the top of the list. And I think at that point, Karen and Derek had been working with us for maybe a year or so. And we said, look, let's reach out to Stephen Porges and see if he'll do a podcast with us. I had tried to read his first book on polyvagal theory, and I wasn't very successful at it.
It's pretty heavy.
It was pretty dense stuff. And I understood the basics of it, but I didn't really have my head around it very well. And every time I asked, we had a lot of talented therapists that were working with us, and I couldn't find anyone at the time that could really tell me in a brief sitting, right?
Yes, to unravel that
theory. How can you put into words? How can you really articulate it? And what's important about it?
Well, actually, Randall, I was going to interrupt you there, because I remember actually early on when we were, I think Andrea and I were one day giving like a co-teaching, and we were going through the night before, the presentation and reviewing, and we do have that reference to Porges's work in terms of how the focus system helps with vagal regulation to help calm the nervous system and enhance the social engagement system. And we reference Porges' work, and we're like, okay, we need to learn a little bit more about what his work is about, because we're teaching about this. And I remember sort of Googling and looking around, and our understanding was so simplistic to what we know now. But yeah, so it's kind of thinking back to those early days of just kind of knowing so little to where we all are now. It's been quite a journey. But yeah, please go on and sort of say.
Well, no, it has been. But at the time, we reached out to Stephen Porges. We got him on the phone, and I was speaking with him and said, we really want you to unravel this for us in a podcast. He was as gracious as could be. He said, do you want to do it over the phone, or do you want to do it here in person in North Carolina? So 2 weeks later, I put together my little sound equipment box, and Karen and I flew to meet with him in North Carolina at his house outside Chapel Hill. And it was a winter day, and there was a lot of snow and ice outside. He had a fire going in his living room. And we went in, and it was really nice. We made some coffee and sat down and ended up recording this wonderful 2 hours where he just really came up with the most wonderful ways of explaining it and explaining the different key aspects of it in ways that I could really follow. This was right at the time he'd just come out with his second book. So he'd already been working on this, right? I mean, he knew that the first book was too dense and that something more was needed to make it more accessible to people. So he had worked on a lot of that language, and a lot of the constructs were easier to follow. And anyway, we had this great meeting and we had lunch, and he said, I've been working on this auditory program for like a decade. In fact, he was testing it down in Australia for a long while. And he said, I'd love it if you'd help me take it to market, right? Let's help me get it perfected and let's release it as a product. So we partnered on it. A year later, we released it. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little skeptical of it at the beginning, right? Because we were used to these longer protocols where you really can say this is a neuroplastic intervention. You're giving something 10, 30, 40 hours to really manifest and rewire the brain. And his program was 5 hours. And I kind of looked at it and thought, yeah, right. Yeah, good luck with that sort of thing. And I couldn't have been more wrong. People started using it, and right off the bat, we were getting the most amazing stories. He had somehow created a highly dynamic protocol where the sound was doing so much when it hit the ear. And in fact, it was almost too powerful initially, if you recall, right? I mean, a lot of people were seeing strong results that they weren't ready for. And so that caused us to regroup and create the before and after programs that the SSP has now. But that was yet again, a whole other chapter, right, to the development of ILS and the focus system. To have the SSP out there being so effective in just 5 hours was a pretty cool thing. And then the idea of the way to deliver the therapy changed pretty soon after that. I think now people are typically looking at the SSP to get the therapy up and running, really to open the client up to change, and then using the focus system or other methods following the SSP. So it sounds like it's all come around to a really good, effective therapy, that's integrating a few different tools. But when it first came out, it was a surprise to everybody. I think it was like doing what it was doing within 5 hours.
Yes, yeah, you're right, because it is, 5 hours. I know often that's what questions I'll get from new practitioners who are interested to learn about it. It's like, really, 5 hours? What can I possibly achieve in that? But it is a gate opener to new possibilities and new change, and yeah, it's quite an amazing intervention, and I think one that partners beautifully with the focus system or other therapy modalities other people have learned over the years. And but I think we've all sort of learned over the years too that is just that we sort of need to embed it within our whole framework of polyvagal theory. That's what really helps to enhance the outcomes of knowledge and that sort of framework behind the intervention. Is that what you think?
Very much so. With the SSP came Dr. Porges's amazing ability to articulate various constructs that he'd been able to identify and develop around the nervous system. And, with ILS, we just didn't have that initially. With the focus system, we saw the change, right? The first thing that we would see with kids using the focus program was that regulation piece.
Right,
exactly. The first thing that parents would talk about was, oh, wow, he just seems so much more calmer. He's able to sit long. He attends better in school. His teachers are making these comments, stuff like that was the first thing we'd see. Well, we didn't really know how to talk about the autonomic nervous system and what might be happening there. We didn't have the concepts nor the language. And so with the SSP and the partnership with Dr. Porges, we all of a sudden had that. And beyond that, we had the wonderful work that Deb Dana has done as basically a translator, right, for polyvagal theory. And so it opened up this whole new world for discussing results that we'd been seeing for over 10 years. But it was shedding new light on it. We looked at everything from a sensory perspective, right?
We did, exactly, we did, yes.
Around the sensory viewpoint. And all of a sudden now we're talking, now it seems as if the sensory perspective has kind of gotten moved aside and everyone's talking about it from a mental health or a psychotherapy perspective.
Well, I think the sensory gets laid on top of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system creates that sort of lens of then how we actually process those sensory systems. So it just takes us that little step deeper, I think.
Very much. Yeah, very much. So then, as we were just saying, I saw you last time in 2019 at the SSP gathering at Dr. Porges's place in Atlantic Beach. And right after that, we sold ILS to the Toronto-based company Unite. So it's now Unite ILS, and they're doing a wonderful job. And the company's just continued to grow. But with that sale, I personally was, not sure what to do with my life. And at that point, I had, my eyes had opened up to fully understand polyvagal theory a lot better than I did back in 2016 when we first started talking with Dr. Porges. And I was finding it most valuable in my relationship with my two boys who were teenagers. And it was interesting, prior to that, it had been a really helpful way of looking at the effects that we were seeing with the ILS focus system, sort of at a clinical level. And all of a sudden, as I started to understand it better, I realized how I was triggering my boys and the fights that I would have with them and where they came from, how they came about, and a whole idea of co-regulation or a lack of co-regulation in a negative way as well as a positive way. and it was really eye-opening for me. And, I think you could say it's not an exaggeration for me to say it was kind of a game changer.
Yeah, that's cool for sharing that. And I think that's important to share just because, some people think when they learn about polyvagal theory, they think it is more something you can use in a therapeutic context, but it really is something that discusses our nervous systems and how our nervous systems interact with each other. And so it's like relevant to us all. And
so
you're exactly right. And I think for a big piece for me, in terms of just me taking home in my day-to-day interactions with people and family members is the whole understanding of neuroception, of these sort of all the subtleties of these sort of non-verbals and energy systems that we're sort of sharing with each other that we're not always consciously aware of, but we sort of pick up and we respond to. So I feel like for me, that's been a big window opening. So then when, my son responds in a certain way and it makes me feel like I want to back, I'm like, you know what, that's just sort of this non-verbal communication, just take a breath and understand what's happening in his nervous system. So so it's definitely something that we can take home into our day-to-day interactions.
Oh yeah, I mean it opens up a whole, it's a life study, right?
Right, yes, exactly.
Try to understand your own nervous system and how it comes across to other people and how you can, how you can use it positively, right? And it came for me in the nick of time with them both in their early teens. And so, the idea of co-regulation, it's a beautiful poetic concept. I think to think that we're walking around all day and our nervous systems are basically talking to each other without us really being conscious of it is pretty amazing to think about.
Yeah.
And then when you think about the practicalities of it and your tone of voice and the way you move and the way you enter a conversation, a room, so many different, dimensions to it.
Exactly.
That as I got to my head around it more and more, I was like, man, this is something that should be required for couples before they get married. It should be required before you have a child. there's just, the applications are limitless. So after the company was sold and I took a break, I started speaking with Stephen Porges and Deb Dana and Karen Onderko about possibly, starting an institute where we would try to take polyvagal theory, the wisdom that's there, and try and bring it out to other disciplines, like education, right? Like
Lovely.
parenting, like different aspects of medicine. Even running a company, a small company like ILS, where I could have really benefited from this 15 years ago.
Right.
I really could have, in terms of managing relationships better.
Yes. I think it leads into business and leadership, and
Yeah.
and I know it's trickled into the legal arena as well. So
Yes.
yes. Vast
So
opportunities
anyway,
for learning.
yeah, that was what we met in New York to talk about it in March 4th of last year. Got back to Denver that weekend. The next day, the pandemic was announced publicly on TV. So big irony, really. Polyvagal theory, really, the Polyvagal Institute was sort of born and developed in one of the least polyvagal times in human history. We've all been isolated here for.
Right, exactly.
Then we launched it in December, and spent the first half of this year trying to put together courses. We'd really like for the Institute to be self-sustaining eventually. And our plan to do that is to partner with other people and create courses that we can offer on the PVI platform, right? So that people can come and take courses at a reasonable price. And that'll just be this ongoing effort. We'll just keep creating new courses. And the way it's evolving is really exciting. We've got some wonderful people coming to us that have been teaching polyvagal theory for years, and they're really excited to be working with Dr. Porges and PVI. And so this is wonderful energy right there at the outset of developing coursework, right? And now we have all of this technology at our disposal, from Zoom and
Yes.
so many ways of accessing the course material remotely. So yeah, it's a really cool time. Very exciting.
So right now, the courses that are being offered are both by Dr. Porges and Deb Dana.
We started out with a core group of courses that were by Dr. Porges and/or Deb Dana. 2-hour course, 4-hour course, 8-hour course, and then Deb has a course that's really long called Foundations. It's a very in-depth clinical application of polyvagal theory that's really, really popular. And I think that's something like 32 CE. So it's pretty in-depth.
And she just does such a lovely job of unraveling polyvagal, the science, and really giving it a very accessible language, isn't she?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so much. And on top of that, it's like, well, she is a therapist, but you feel like you've been talking with the therapist for a while every time you come away feeling really nice. And it's like, well, okay, I guess that's part of what a therapist should do. But she somehow is able to personify a lot of the wonderful principles from the polyvagal theory. So you have that benefit also. Spending time with them, of course.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah,
and I must say that even with Dr. Porges being a renowned scientist, I mean, he does a really lovely job of trying to make his knowledge very accessible too. So it's just not all science, that he definitely makes it so you can understand it. Yeah.
Very much so. Well, it's a talent you don't often see in a researcher academic. He's got some pretty amazing communication skills. I think that, we're all always learning from. Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, the two of them are really. I've been really lucky. I've just sort of tripped along into these wonderful mentors through my life, and been able to. And they seem to have come to me right at the right time too. And so I'm enjoying that aspect of the journey very much. But we got those key courses up on the site, and then over the last 5 months, developed a number of other courses, 2 in education, one in addiction, another one that's awesome for adoptive parents. And we've got another half a dozen in the pipeline right now that we're working on.
Excellent,
So we're
excellent.
releasing them as we go.
So primarily, am I right that right now a lot of them are sort of geared for practitioners, and then sounds like education? And is there plans to make some courses that would be like for like individuals and families who want to learn a bit about polyvagal and start to implement some of those strategies? Just how, like, we were just talking about how we've sort of integrated it into our family dynamics.
That's right, exactly. We've been fortunate to be working with Mona Delahook, who has a wonderful voice for both educators and parents at the same time. And she and Dr. Porges have this wonderful dynamic together. So we've just finished a series of recordings by them that we're going to be releasing here next month. We're collaborating with some really talented medical folks on trying to, well, we hope it sounds a little grandiose, but we're hoping it would be able to contribute toward a new paradigm for medical organizations and medical practice, where you have, right now, you've got a lot of physician burnout. You have doctors, if they're being burned out, they're not exactly going to be great co-regulators for their patients, right? So you've got all of these sort of weird situations within the medical field that do not act as constructive means toward healing, right? I mean,
Yes.
It's a highly dysfunctional system.
Yeah, and the environment doesn't really give over cues of safety, and often it's sterile and
Completely.
yeah,
And it's lacking in even common sense there. I mean, we
Yes.
learned this. I remember when we had the dream pad, right, with ILS, and my first exposure to NICUs, and it was the Stanford NICU, and it was all these different places. Like, okay, God, Stanford must be like this beautiful NICU, right? You would think it would have all the sensitivity of that would be expected of a place where people are going to emerge into the world.
Exactly.
And you go, and instead it's like you're in Coney Island or something. The lights are bright, and all these loud noises, and this is Disneyland that we're expected to bring a baby into. I mean, no common sense around it at all, right? And I think that same lack of sensibilities they're rife through the whole system. And a good starting place for correcting it, I think, is looking at polyvagal principles in the context of getting oneself, becoming a good co-regulator oneself, right? So working on these skills internally, and then practicing them with your coworkers and your clients, and you start to develop a sensitivity and an awareness of what's needed for that kind of relational healing. It's sort of your patients are there for, but they're not really getting. So there's the medical field. We've got
that's what comes to mind when it's just you're talking about in the medical field in terms of just health and wellness. That we know that we're through co-regulation. You're going to have a vagal system that's that rest and restorative component of our nervous system is online. So our immune system is in a more optimal state to cope with whatever medical crisis might be happening. So it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's commonsensical, and it's not that, it's there's nothing hard to understand.
The science to back it up.
How it's missing. Yes, exactly. Now there's the science and the language to talk about it and back it up and hopefully create some change.
That's an exciting development.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's a long road to hoe, but we're making some good progress. And
I have to tell you this. I have to tell you this one little side story, Randall, from coming back to Australia after, obviously, I lived in the US for 23 years, but I went to and our system isn't 100% perfect, but we do have socialized medicine here in Australia. But I remember one of my first appointments of going to a local doctor, and I had to go have a scan done. And I'm sitting in the office, and the doctor actually calls the radiology to make the appointment for me to go and have the scan done. And I'm thinking, this doesn't happen in America, is that the doctor comes in, orders it, and the nurse comes in and she gives you the script and you need to go and order and sort of try and work it all out on your own. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, you're actually, making all this for me. I was like,
Wow.
absolutely
Nice.
blown away. And then,
Yeah.
and then another time I actually had to have a little bit of a surgery on my leg, and I actually had the doctors coming in to wrap my leg, and they were like 20 minutes, two of them, and I was like, absolutely never would it would be the nurses or the support staff that would be coming in to do that, and so it was very interesting, quite a shift.
But how does it make you feel, right? Aside from the comparison with the US,
it made
cared
you
for,
exactly. It made you feel important. It made you feel cared for. They knew that this whole process is what is important for the healing to take place.
No, it's a big piece that's just somehow become omitted in our system, that care. And there's always that phrase, quality of care, right? It's typically used for bedside manner or nurses or things like that. But I think that's what, if you took that phrase, quality of care, and you just completely expanded it, include the quality of care we all have for each other, the quality of care, right, that you might have for a student or for a patient or whatever. I think that's one of the big things that polyvagal theory has to offer. It's really looking at quality of care beyond the medical context, but really it's care to yourself. It's self-care as well as just to other human beings.
Oh, this all sounds really exciting. What another second journey to be on and to be involved in.
Yeah,
I'm sure it must feel really like, at the end of the day, like you're making a difference.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, and we're making a difference, and hopefully we can do it expeditiously, right? And we're pretty fortunate in that Deb Dana and Stephen Porges are pretty, I don't know what you even call them. They're like lightning rods of attention right now, that are, before COVID hit, I remember sitting down with both of them and talking about their year, that year, like 2020. And they were both going to be traveling so extensively. I don't even know if they really knew how demanding it was going to be. You look at the schedule, they were going from, Australia to Austria to, just all over the globe in such a sort of crazy rate that it looked like it would be tiring for someone who was in their 30s, not someone who's at the peak of their career. And anyway, then COVID hit, of course, and they were spared all of that on the globe. And now I think they've gotten spoiled, sitting in their living rooms, training people in all corners.
Right. Yes, right? Yeah.
But
so the reach might actually, now with technology, the reach may have probably extended more than or the travel would have done.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
probably. And so many more people can access the talks. The talks are less expensive, right? They're less expensive to carry, to run. The events, the conferences are less expensive to hold. So they're charging less, and the whole scale of things has changed with the net result of, I think, more people accessing the information. So we'll see what happens through the rest of this year and next year, but it's exciting.
Yeah, that does sound exciting. So for listeners listening in, and I know we have quite a lot of practitioners who are listening, so they can find the Polyvagal Institute. So where's the best way for them to?
Polyvagalinstitute.org.
Mhm.
Okay, polyvagalinstitute.org is the URL. I'd love for everyone to jot down the dates of November 5th and 6th. We've got an online summit that we're planning, a virtual summit, and it's over those 2 days. We're going to have some wonderful speakers and some wonderful content, including both Deb Dana and Stephen Porges. And we'll have more coming out on that real shortly. But if you're interested in polyvagal related information and courses, please come to PVI at polyvagalinstitute.org and register for our newsletter. We're using the newsletter as a vehicle to tell people of trainings and updating on things that's going on. We don't do very much marketing through our email marketing. So if you do register with us, we're only sending out a newsletter once every 2 months. It's not like you're going to be bombarded every week with emails. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me, Joanne.
No, thank you so much, Randall, for sharing. And this is really important information and some great learning resources for people. And it's exciting to hear that those learning resources are going to be expanding into education, into the medical arena. I'm sure it's going to into business and leadership. So it's really it is kind of endless, isn't it? Where it can go, those partnerships. So so thank you, Randall, for coming and sharing your time and sharing this information with everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We are so happy that in association with the Polyvagal Institute, we are able to offer a discount to the Art and Science of the Polyvagal Theory course. This offer is valid through to August 31st, so please make sure you make the most of this opportunity. The discount equals approximately 25% off the listed price. Information about accessing the discount will be listed in the show notes, as well as listed on the Safe and Sound Protocol podcast Facebook group, and can be ordered through store.integratedlistening.com.au. Again, to order this course at the discounted rate, go to store.integratedlistening.com.au. The price is listed in Australian dollars, but does equate to approximately 25% off the regular price. For additional information, if you have any other questions, you can list it onto the Facebook group or email info@integratedlistening.com.au, or you can email me directly at the sspodcast1@gmail.com. Everyone have a lovely day.